My husband told me our daughter died the moment she was born. He said the doctors took her away because she was deformed. He said it was merciful. He said it was better I never saw her. And because I trusted him, I buried a child I had never touched. For 15 years, I lived with grief that never made sense. I mourned a baby without memories, without a grave, without answers. Every time I asked a question, my husband had one ready. He said reopening the past would only destroy us. He said some truths were too ugly to survive daylight. I believed him. That belief cost me 15 years. The first thing that changed was the basement. New locks appeared quietly. Then another. Then another. He said it was structural damage. Said the foundation was unstable. Said it wasn't safe for anyone to go down there. He made me promise. And I did, because promises are easy when you don't know what they're protecting. Years passed. He built a new life inside the same house. New clothes. New friends. New excuses. Money came and went strangely. The inheritance my father left for the baby disappeared into investments I never saw. When I asked, he said it was painful to talk about. He said I should let go. Then the sound started. Not loud. Not every night. Just enough to doubt yourself. First, I blamed the house. Old pipes. Settling walls. But houses don't whisper names. One night during a storm, the power went out. And in the dark, I heard it clearly. A voice. Young. Controlled. Saying one word. Mom. I stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs. The locks were broken. They had been breaking for a long time. I went down, and there she was. Alive. Standing in the light like she had been waiting for permission to exist. She wasn't deformed. She wasn't sick. She wasn't broken. She was hidden. My husband told her the world didn't want her. Told her her mother was dead. Told her she was safer if no one knew she existed. While she grew up underground, learning to be quiet, learning to disappear. He spent her inheritance on a new family upstairs. When he came home that night, he wasn't expecting silence. He wasn't expecting light in the dining room. He wasn't expecting to see a young woman sitting calmly at the table. In front of her lay three things: his birth certificate, a stack of documents he believed were buried forever, and a knife resting flat on the table. Not raised, not threatening, just present. She looked at him and said, calmly, steadily, "Hello, Daddy. I'm not a ghost." The room changed instantly. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He dropped his keys, because he understood something before anyone explained it. This wasn't revenge. This was exposure. The knife wasn't for him. It was for the lies. The documents proved everything: illegal confinement, financial fraud, identity manipulation. Every story he had controlled for 15 years was suddenly sitting in plain sight. He tried to speak. He talked about fear, about protection, about doing what he thought was right. He said one lie led to another. He said stopping felt impossible. She listened, then asked one question. If you were protecting me, why did you lock the door? He had no answer that fit the room. He tried to apologize, tried to explain, tried to negotiate the future without facing the past. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply stopped participating in his version of reality. That terrified him more than anger ever could. He asked what she wanted. She didn't answer immediately. She looked around the dining room, at the walls that heard everything, at the table where decisions were made without her, at the house that swallowed her childhood whole. Then she said, "I want space. I want air. I want time that isn't measured by locks." He realized then that control had quietly changed hands. The knife stayed on the table, untouched, unnecessary, because the truth no longer needed protection. The house felt different with the truth sitting openly between us. Walls that once hid things now felt too thin. Every object seemed like it had been listening. He asked if anyone else knew. No one answered. Silence did more damage than shouting ever could. As the night stretched on, his confidence dissolved. He waited now for permission to speak, to move, to exist in the space he once ruled. The man who controlled every story was now trapped inside one he couldn't edit. The girl he buried alive didn't need to threaten him. She just existed. And that was enough. The girl at my dining table wasn't holding a knife for him. She was holding it for herself, in case she forgot who she was. For 15 years, my husband controlled one thing better than money, better than lies: silence. He trained the house to stay quiet, the basement to stay forgotten, and me to stay obedient. He told me our daughter died at birth. He cried the perfect amount. He waited exactly 3 days before going back to work. Grief doesn't question timing. Love doesn't audit stories. That's how people get buried while still breathing. She learned to count days by footsteps above her head. She learned which floorboards meant anger, which meant food, which meant nothing at all. She wasn't raised. She was managed. No mirrors, no clocks, no windows, just rules. Don't make noise. Don't touch the door. Don't ask about your mother. And the most dangerous rule of all, don't imagine a life upstairs. Because imagination is how prisons collapse. The night the locks failed, it wasn't an accident. She planned it for months. Not to escape, to arrive. She bathed. She changed into clothes stolen slowly over years. She brushed her hair like someone preparing for a funeral. When she sat at the dining table, she didn't rush. She waited. My husband walked in smiling. That smile died halfway across the room, because the face looking back at him wasn't a ghost. It was proof. She placed his birth certificate on the table, then the financial records, then the trust documents he liquidated the moment he declared her dead. And finally, the knife. Flat, centered, calm. He whispered her name. She corrected him. "That's the name you buried. This one survived." He tried to cry. Real tears this time. He talked about fear, about shame, about how one bad decision became a lifetime. She listened like someone hearing a stranger describe a storm they already drowned in. Then she stood, and something unexpected happened. She pushed the knife away. That scared him more than anything. "I don't need this," she said. "I needed it once, when I thought hurting you would give me back time." She leaned forward, but I realized something underground. His hands were shaking now. "No one can give me back 15 years, but I can decide what the next 15 do to you." Silence. Heavy. Clinical. She turned to me, the mother she had never met, and asked the question I feared more than any accusation. "Did you really believe him?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was worse. I didn't just believe him. I chose the version of reality that hurt less. My husband reached for me. She stopped him with 2 words. "Not yet." Those words stripped him of authority instantly. She wasn't angry. She was finished. Finished being hidden. Finish being explained away. Finish being convenient. She told him to sit. He obeyed. For the first time in his life, he had no script. She explained everything calmly. How the documents were already copied, how lawyers already existed, how silence upstairs was temporary, how truth doesn't knock, it arrives. He asked what she wanted. She answered without hesitation. Nothing you own. Nothing you stole. Nothing you can replace. She picked up the birth certificate, tore it in half. You don't get to be my origin story. Then she looked at me again. Softly. I didn't come to punish him, she said. I came to see if you were real. That broke me. Because prisons aren't always underground. Sometimes they're marriages. She walked past him toward the door. He tried one last time. Where will you go? She paused and said, somewhere I don't need locks to feel safe. The knife stayed on the table, untouched, because fear was no longer useful. And as the door closed behind her, I realized something chilling. She didn't take revenge. She took control and left him alone with a house that finally knew everything. The girl didn't threaten my husband. She thanked him. That's when I knew he was already finished. The police always say monsters look ordinary. They're wrong. Monsters look organized. My husband was punctual, clean, respected. He donated to schools, paid taxes early, smiled during family photos. And for 15 years he told me the same story without changing a word. Our baby didn't survive. Same sentence, same tone, same pause after it. Grief that rehearsed is not grief. It's maintenance. I didn't know the basement had a second door. I didn't know the house plans were altered. I didn't know the locks were replaced from the inside. I didn't know because I didn't want to. Love is the most effective blindfold. The night everything ended, the power went out for exactly 90 seconds. Not an accident. She timed it. When the lights came back, someone was sitting at our dining table. Straight posture. Hands folded. Calm breathing. Not scared. Prepared. My husband froze. Not because she was holding a knife, but because she wasn't. She was holding papers, adoption denial forms, medical suppression records, a forged death certificate, and one photo, me, standing at the top of the basement stairs, smiling, taken without my knowledge. She looked at him and said something that still echoes in my chest. Thank you for keeping me alive. His mouth opened. No sound came out. She turned to me. You didn't know, she said. Not asking. Stating. That was worse than blame. She explained everything like a teacher reviewing a lesson. How he decided she was too much responsibility. How he hit her instead of abandoning her. How control felt easier than consequences. How silence became cheaper than care. She wasn't angry. She was educated. That's what terrified him. She stood and walked around the table. Slow. Measured. You taught me something important, she said to him. That people don't need chains to stay trapped. She touched the basement key on his keyring, then dropped it into a glass of water. Just belief. He begged then. Promise money. Apologies. Therapy. She smiled. I already took what mattered. He asked what that was. She pointed at me. Witnesses. That's when I understood. She didn't come to escape. She came to expose. The knife was never for him. It was for the rope he used to tie the basement door shut. Symbolic. Proof. She left it on the table and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she said one last thing without turning around. I won't tell people what you did. Relief flashed on his face. I'll let them see who you are when no one's afraid of you anymore. The door closed. The house felt smaller instantly. My husband collapsed into a chair. He whispered my name. I didn't answer, because for the first time I wasn't scared of him. I was ashamed of myself. And somewhere out there, a girl who was never supposed to exist was finally living. Not as a victim, but as the author of the ending. The police didn't come that night. She planned that too. If they had, my husband would have turned into a victim. Confused father, tragic misunderstanding, paperwork gone wrong. He was good at that. He practiced innocence the way other men practice golf. Instead, the next morning his phone started ringing. Not police. Banks. Lawyers. People who don't shout. People who pause before speaking. That's when real fear begins. She hadn't stolen money. She had moved it. Every account connected to the inheritance, hers, had been redirected into a trust. Not in her name. Not in mine. In his mother's name. A woman he had declared legally dead 8 years ago to avoid medical debt. A woman who was very much alive. The basement wasn't just a room. It was a system. Soundproof insulation. Air circulation rerouted. A small desk bolted into the wall. Education materials. She hadn't been hidden like an animal. She had been managed. And management leaves trails. She knew his schedule better than I did. She knew which neighbors never looked down. Which delivery drivers didn't ask questions. Which cameras were fake. She knew because she watched. For 15 years. When the locks broke, it wasn't force. It was permission. She had the codes. She had always had them. I found the first letter 2 days later. Not addressed to me. Addressed to the woman who loved him. It was polite. Almost gentle. She wrote that love doesn't make someone guilty. But it does make them responsible once the truth arrives. She apologized. Not for hiding. For waiting. She said she needed me to see her face before I heard her story. Because stories without faces are easy to ignore. The second letter went public. Not online. In court. My husband was summoned for a property clarification. He thought it was a mistake. He wore his best suit. Confidence is loud until it isn't. The judge read from documents older than our marriage. Documents that proved the house, the land, the renovations, all funded by the inheritance meant for a child declared dead. A child who now sat quietly in the back row. Hair tied neatly. Hands still. Eyes trained forward. She didn't look at him once. That was the punishment. The judge asked if the child was present. She stood. I prefer daughter, she said calmly. The room shifted. Not gasps. Silence. He tried to speak. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. 2 words. 15 years undone. After that, everything slowed. Not dramatically. Administratively. He lost access. Then credibility. Then allies. People don't abandon you when you fall. They abandon you when helping you becomes inconvenient. I met her once more. At a cafe. Public place. Daylight. She ordered tea. No shaking hands. She told me she didn't hate him. Hate requires investment, she said. I already gave him enough. She asked if I was angry at her. I said no. She nodded like she already knew. Before leaving, she said something I'll never forget. He thought hiding me erased me. She smiled. But hiding only sharpens memory. She walked away into a life she built quietly, patiently, without asking permission. And my husband, he still lives. But every door closes slower for him now. Every room feels watched. Every silence feels like footsteps. Because the worst punishment isn't exposure. It's knowing the truth escaped you and learn to speak. The house didn't feel empty after he left. It felt exposed. Every wall suddenly looked thinner, like it had been listening all along. I started noticing details I'd ignored for years. Vents placed too low, doors that locked from the outside, a light switch in the basement that controlled nothing upstairs. Or so I thought. That night the power flickered. Just once. Then everything came back on. Except the basement light. She noticed before I did. It's on a separate line, she said quietly. He didn't want it connected to the rest of the house. I asked how she knew. She shrugged. You learn how things work when you're not allowed to leave. The next few days were strange in a way I didn't have words for. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just heavy. Neighbors started stopping by. Not to ask questions. To look. They'd smile, comment on the weather, then glance past me, down the hallway toward the stairs. They were searching for the story they'd already heard pieces of. She died at birth. She was sick. They moved on. People don't want truth. They want confirmation. My daughter didn't give it to them. She stayed invisible. On purpose. Instead, she went through boxes. Old boxes. The ones labeled tax, medical, insurance. She didn't rush. She sorted. That scared me more than anger ever could. One afternoon, she brought me a folder. Inside were photos I'd never seen. Hospital room. A newborn wrapped in a blanket. A man standing slightly too far from the bed. My husband. Holding nothing. He never touched me, she said. Not once. I finally asked the question I'd been afraid of. Why didn't you try to escape? She looked at me, not accusing, not blaming. Just honest. Where would I go? She asked. The world I was told about didn't include me. That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't just her story. It was mine too. A week later, his new family contacted me. The woman sounded tired. Not angry. Tired. She said he had told her everything was a lie. That I was unstable. That the girl was manipulating me. I listened. Then I said one sentence. There's a trust fund in your daughter's name, I told her. Ask him why it was built 15 years ago. Silence. Then the line went dead. That night, my daughter finally sat at the dining table. Not with documents. With food. She ate slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to rush the moment. This table is new, she said. I nodded. He bought it after I was gone, she added. Then she smiled. Not cruel. Resolved. He always liked pretending nothing existed before his choices. The smile faded. I don't. The next twist didn't come from her. It came from the city. A notice arrived stating the basement violated multiple housing codes. Complaints had been filed anonymously years ago and ignored. Until now, someone had reactivated them. With evidence. Photos. Measurements. Diagrams. She hadn't just survived. She documented. The inspector walked through the basement in silence. Then he looked at me. Did you know this room was registered as a storage unit? He asked. I shook my head. It was registered as a non-habitable space, he continued, meaning anyone inside it didn't officially exist. After he left, she said something chillingly calm. He erased me legally first, she said. The rest was easy. I asked her what she wanted now. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed me one last envelope. Inside was a copy of his birth certificate and a note written in neat handwriting. Identity can be taken. Truth can't. She didn't say revenge. She didn't say justice. She said, I want to live loudly. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. She didn't come upstairs to haunt him. She came upstairs to replace the silence. The first night she slept upstairs, neither of us really slept. Not because of fear, because of memory. The house sounded different when the basement was empty. Every creak felt misplaced, like the building itself was confused about what it was finally allowed to remember. She chose the smallest bedroom. I don't need space, she said. I need walls that don't lock. I didn't argue. The next morning, she asked me something that knocked the air out of my chest. Did you ever look for me? It wasn't accusatory. It was factual. I told her the truth. That I cried. That I screamed. That I was told I imagined her. That doctors use words like complication and non-viable. That grief was handed to me like a diagnosis. She nodded slowly. He was careful, she said. He didn't lie loudly. He lied professionally. That afternoon she went out alone. No disguise. No drama. Just jeans, a jacket, and sunlight. I watched from the window, heart racing, expecting sirens, neighbors, something. Nothing happened. The world didn't stop. Just accepted her. When she came back, she was holding a library card. I wanted proof I exist somewhere harmless, she said. That was the moment I understood something crucial. She wasn't angry. She was rebuilding identity. Quietly. Methodically. A few days later, a letter arrived addressed to her name. Not the name he gave her. The one written on the trust. The legal one. She opened it without shaking. Inside was a request. Not from him. From his lawyer. He wanted a private meeting. She laughed. Not amused. Relieved. He still thinks this is a negotiation, she said. She didn't go. Instead, she sent one sentence back. You don't get access to what you tried to erase. That sentence did damage no shouting ever could. Because silence, when intentional, terrifies manipulators. Then came the interview request. A journalist. Local but respected. She didn't want to talk. I thought that was the end of it. But then she asked me something that still makes my throat tighten. Would you sit next to me if I did? So we did. No faces shown. No basement footage. Just voices. Facts. Timelines. She spoke calmly. No drama. No tears. The journalist asked why she waited 15 years. She answered, because I was raised to believe survival was obedience. The interview aired quietly. No headlines. Just people listening. And people recognized patterns. Emails came in. Other women. Other children. Other basements. Different houses. Same structure. That's when I realized this story wasn't ending. It was branching. One evening, she stood in the doorway of the dining room. The same table. Same chair. She ran her fingers along the wood. He sat here planning a future that required me to disappear, she said. Then she looked up at me. I won't destroy him, she said. I'll outlive his version of reality. The final twist didn't come from courts or media. It came from inside him. He stopped denying, then stopped defending, then stopped responding. People like him don't collapse publicly. They shrink privately. He moved, changed numbers, avoided places. But that doesn't undo knowing. Knowing that the person you erased learned your name, your patterns, your documents, your weaknesses. Knowing she didn't need to hurt you, because existing was enough. The last thing she said about him surprised me. I hope he gets help, she said. Not forgiveness. Not mercy. Distance. Closure doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like walking forward so completely that the past loses oxygen. Tonight she's upstairs. Door open. Light on. Music playing. Not loud. Just present. And for the first time since the day I was told my baby died, the house feels like it's breathing correctly. But somewhere out there, he knows. He knows the basement is empty. And that silence, it's louder than any ghost. The first time she laughed, it startled me. Not because it was loud, because it sounded unfamiliar in this house. It happened over something small, burnt toast. She scraped it, shrugged, and said, "Guess I'm still learning normal mistakes." Normal. That word carried weight. Days passed without drama, and that was the most unsettling part. No sirens. No confrontations. Just life settling into a shape it had never been allowed to take before. She started rearranging things. Not aggressively. Purposefully. Furniture shifted so no space felt hidden. Mirrors placed where corners used to swallow light. Curtains opened in rooms that had always stayed dim. This house was designed to forget, she said. I'm redesigning it to remember. One afternoon, she asked to see the attic. I froze. The attic had never been forbidden, but we had never gone there either. It was one of those spaces grief quietly seals. Inside were boxes from before our marriage. Before her. She found a photo album. Not ours. His. Inside were pictures of him younger, smiling too easily, always standing slightly apart from others. She studied each photo carefully. He's always on the edge, she said. People like that don't want connection. They want control without witnesses. That night he tried to call. For the first time. I didn't answer. Neither did she. But she listened to the voicemail later. He didn't apologize. He explained. Explanations are what people offer when they still believe context can erase harm. She deleted the message without comment. A week later, something unexpected happened. A package arrived. No return address. Inside was a children's book. Old. Worn. One I used to read when I was pregnant. My handwriting was inside the cover. She traced it with her finger. I remember your voice, she said quietly. I just didn't know it belonged to you. That was the closest we came to tears. After that, she stopped hiding. Not dramatically. She got a job. Part-time. Nothing connected to the story. She told me she wanted coworkers who knew her only as herself. No history. No tragedy. Just a name and a schedule. The neighbors adjusted. Slowly. People don't like admitting they missed something terrible right next to them, so they chose kindness instead. Wave. Smile. Small talk. Acceptance disguised as normalcy. One evening while washing dishes, she asked a question that made my hands go still. Do you ever wonder who you would have been if I had stayed upstairs? I didn't answer right away. because the truth was complicated. I think I would have trusted my instincts more, I said finally. She nodded. That's what he took from both of us. The final shift came quietly. A legal notice arrived stating the inheritance was officially restored, plus interest. No trial. No spectacle. Just correction. She read it, folded it neatly, and put it in a drawer. I don't need the money to prove anything, she said. But I'll use it to make sure no one else disappears quietly. She started volunteering. Advocacy groups. Policy meetings. She spoke with outrage. That made people listen. And my husband, he faded. Not ruined. Not punished publicly. Just irrelevant. People like him don't fear prison. They fear being unnecessary. The last time I asked her how she felt about him, she said something that still echoes in me. He needed me to be a secret so he could feel important, she said. I don't need him to feel real. Tonight she's planning a small gathering. Friends from work. Nothing fancy. Just food and music and voices filling rooms that once swallowed sound. I watched her set the table. The same table. Different energy. Before sitting down, she paused and looked around the room. Then she smiled, not victorious, not bitter. Free. And in that moment, I realized the story everyone expects. Revenge, confrontation, collapse was never the point. The real ending was this. A life that continued without asking permission from the man who tried to erase it. And somewhere, wherever he is now, I know he feels it. Not as fear, but as absence. Because the one thing he built his power on, silence, no longer belongs to him. The gathering was small. 5 people. 6 if you counted me hovering near the kitchen doorway. They didn't know her history. They didn't need to. They laughed at ordinary things, traffic, work, a bad movie someone watched on a plane. The sound filled the house in a way it never had before, like air finally circulating where it had been trapped. At one point, someone asked how long she'd lived here. She answered without hesitation. Long enough to understand silence, she said. Not long enough to accept it. No one questioned it. People accept answers when they're delivered calmly. After they left, she stayed at the table, stacking plates slowly, deliberately, as if marking the end of something ceremonial. He would have hated this, she said. I knew exactly who she meant. He needed rooms to feel empty, she continued. Empty rooms make it easier to believe you're the only one who matters. That night, I found myself standing at the top of the basement stairs. The door was open, light spilling down. I hadn't gone down there since the inspectors came. Part of me feared what the space would say if I listened too closely. She appeared beside me. You don't have to, she said gently. I want to, I replied. The basement looked smaller than I remembered. Not because it had changed, because fear had shrunk. The walls were bare now. No desk, no mattress, no signs of occupation, just concrete and quiet. It looks harmless, I said. That's how systems like this survive, she replied. They look harmless until you ask why they exist. She pointed to a corner. There, she said. That's where I used to count hours. I asked how. She smiled faintly. I'd listen to footsteps. I learned the rhythm of the house. Mornings meant movement. Afternoons meant stillness. Evenings meant pretending everything was normal upstairs. She paused. I knew when you cried, she added softly. Sound travels in strange ways. The weight of that nearly took me to my knees, but she didn't let the moment collapse. She never did. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from a university. An acceptance. A program focused on social systems, ethics, and policy. She read it twice. Then a third time. Not disbelief. Recognition. They see me, she said. That night we packed boxes together. Not because she was leaving the house, but because she was expanding beyond it. He tried one last time. A message came through an unknown number. No threats. No apologies. Just one sentence. I never meant for it to go this far. She stared at the screen, then turned it off. Intent doesn't erase design, she said. And this was designed. She didn't block him. She didn't respond. She simply removed herself from the equation. The final shift came when the house was officially re-registered. No longer under his name. No longer tied to a story of loss. Just an address. A place. One evening as the sun dipped low, she stood in the doorway and looked back inside. Do you think he ever misses it? I asked. She considered the question carefully. I think he misses control, she said. Not us. Then she stepped forward. And something subtle but profound happened. The house didn't feel like a recovered space anymore. Felt like a starting point. People think survival is the end of the story. It isn't. Survival is just the moment the story becomes yours. And as she walked into her future, open-eyed, unhidden, unafraid, I realized the most unsettling truth of all. The man who tried to erase her would never truly understand what defeated him, because it wasn't exposure. It wasn't law. It wasn't confrontation. It was something far quieter. A girl who learned to exist loudly in a world that once refused to see her. And a silence that finally learned it no longer had authority. Time didn't rush after that. It stretched. Mornings became predictable in a way they never had before. Coffee at the same hour. Sunlight reaching the same patch of floor. Small routines that felt almost ceremonial, as if repetition itself was proof of safety. She started keeping a notebook. Not a diary. A record. Dates. Conversations. Observations. Things people said when they thought no one important was listening. Memory fades, she explained. Patterns don't. Sometimes she'd read aloud from it. Not dramatically, just thoughtfully. She wasn't cataloging pain. She was mapping behavior. That was when I understood she wasn't trying to heal the past. She was preventing a future version of it. One evening she asked me to sit with her on the back steps. The air was cool. Quiet. I used to imagine what the sky looked like from here, she said. I could hear wind through the vents, but I never saw where it came from. I asked what she imagined. Freedom, she replied, but vague. I didn't know what it meant yet. She does now. The university orientation came and went. She didn't attend the welcome events. She said she didn't need to be introduced to herself. Instead, she visited the campus library. She came home glowing. Places like that, she said, are built on the belief that knowledge should be accessible. She paused. I was the opposite of that. Weeks later, something small but telling happened. A man knocked on the door. Middle-aged. Polite. Nervous. He introduced himself as a former contractor. He said he'd worked on the basement renovations years ago. He said he hadn't known. But then he added something that changed the temperature of the room. He paid extra, the man said quietly. Not for speed. For silence. She thanked him. Not emotionally. Professionally. After he left, she wrote his name in the notebook, then closed it. He didn't design the system, she said. He just helped it function. That distinction mattered to her. She wasn't collecting villains. She was tracing accountability. The house continued to change. Not structurally, emotionally. Plants appeared near windows. Art on walls, abstract, nothing literal. Music played in the evenings, sometimes soft, sometimes unapologetically loud. One night while cleaning, I found an old lock in a drawer. Basement lock. Heavy. Cold. I held it out to her. She studied it for a moment. Then she took it outside, set it on the ground, and walked away. No ceremony. No statement. Just removal. The last update about him came indirectly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he'd moved again. Smaller place. Fewer connections. Reputation unclear. People didn't ask questions. They just stopped inviting. He'll always feel watched now, she said when I told her. Not because anyone is watching, but because I could be. That was the closest she came to sounding powerful. But even that wasn't pride. It was acceptance. On the anniversary of the day she came upstairs, we didn't mark it. No candle. No speech. She made dinner. We ate. Later, as she washed dishes, she said something so simple it nearly broke me. I don't feel like a secret anymore. That was it. Not healed. Not whole. Seen. And that, I realized, was the true end of the story most people expect. But life doesn't end when truth is revealed. It begins when truth stops needing witnesses. She's planning to move next year. Not away from me. Away from the address. I don't want my first real life defined by where I survived, she said. I understood. Some places are chapters, not homes. As for the house, it stands. Bright. Ordinary. Passers-by would never guess what it once contained. And that's fine. Because the story no longer lives in the walls. It lives in a woman who learned slowly, deliberately, that existing openly is the loudest answer to erasure. And if he ever wonders whether she's angry, he'll never get that answer. Because the most unsettling thing she ever did was move on without needing him to understand why. The first time she called the house temporary, I didn't argue. Some truths don't need defense. She started spending more time outside. Not running from anything, just moving toward things. Cafes, parks, bookstores, ordinary places that don't ask where you came from before letting you sit down. One evening, she came home with a plant. Small, green, fragile. I don't know how long it'll live, she said. That's kind of the point. She placed it near the window that used to stay covered. Light touched it immediately. She noticed. She always notices light. I asked her once if she ever felt anger suddenly, without warning. She thought for a long time. Anger is loud, she said. What I feel is more precise. She wasn't sharpening herself for revenge. She was refining boundaries. That distinction mattered. A letter arrived from the city zoning office confirming the basement would be permanently reclassified. No future owner could convert it back into anything hidden. The language was cold, legal, final. She read it carefully, then nodded. Good, she said. Spaces should match the truth of how they're used. That night I heard her pacing upstairs. Not anxious. Thinking. The kind of pacing that belongs to decisions. The next morning, she told me she had changed her name. Not legally yet. Just socially. I want to choose what people call me, she said. not inherit it. I practiced the new name quietly while making coffee. Fit her. The past didn't protest. Weeks passed. Her confidence didn't arrive suddenly. It accumulated. Like interest. She corrected people gently when they interrupted her. She asked questions without shrinking. She stopped explaining herself preemptively. Those are small things. But small things are how power changes hands. One afternoon, she invited me to walk with her through the neighborhood. We passed houses I'd lived beside for years. She walked calmly, head high, no hiding, no announcement, just presence. At one house, an older woman paused while watering plants. She looked at my daughter, smiled, said hello. That was it. Nothing collapsed. Nothing erupted. The world didn't reject her. Later, she said something that stayed with me. He built my fear on the idea that people wouldn't accept me, she said. Turns out, he needed that fear more than I ever did. That realization felt heavier than any courtroom verdict. One night, while cleaning out the garage, she found something else. A camera. Old. Unplugged. Hidden. She held it carefully. Not shaking. Just curious. He stopped using this years ago, she said. Once he was sure I believed him. She didn't destroy it. She didn't keep it. She put it in a box labeled evidence and sealed it. Closure doesn't always mean erasing proof. Sometimes it means controlling where proof lives. The last update about him came through someone else again. He'd asked about her. Indirectly. Cautiously. Like a man testing ice. She didn't react. She didn't ask follow-up questions. She just said, "That chapter doesn't get sequels." That sentence felt like an ending. But life kept moving. She got her first university schedule. Pinned it on the fridge. Not proudly. Casually. As if this had always been the plan. That night we ate dinner in silence. Not heavy silence. Comfortable. The kind that doesn't demand to be filled. Before going upstairs, she stopped and looked around the living room. "This place gave me my first proof," she said. "Proof of what?" I asked. "That truth doesn't need volume," she replied. "Just time." She turned off the light. And for the first time, the darkness didn't feel like something hiding. Felt like rest.